This is a review of Module 3, Quiz Part B of selected questions. We'll just take the first one on this line, which is the correct answer was thymus. You were asked to identify the organ. And only 53% of the class got it correct, and almost 28% of the class said it was a lymph node. All right, and this just reminds ourselves of the difference between a lymph node and a thymus. You're going to look for nodules in a lymph node. You're never going to find nodules, lymphatic nodules, in a thymus. Both a lymph node and a thymus have a medulla and a cortex. And you can see that here. Although in a lymph node, usually the cortex is all out around here, but the thymus has lobules. Like, for example, this is a lobule up here, you see. And you see that in this lobule, you've got the medulla and you have the cortex, but no nodules. And also in the medulla, you have the Hassel's corpuscles. So you begin at low magnification and think about it and the different shape. And it couldn't be spleen because the spleen is more solid and it has red and blue. Blue being white pulp, red being red pulp. And so the only thing this can be is the thymus. In this question, we just wanted you to recognize that this was spleen and then choose the correct statement about that. And if it was a spleen, it reacts to antigens in blood. But it's not one of the sites for recirculation of T cells. That's in the lymph node. Antibodies produced into the circulation by way of efferent lymphatics, that's the lymph node. Produces CD4 and CD8 lymphocytes, that's the thymus. Produces platelets, that's the bone marrow, and that would be megakaryocytes. So we gave you this specimen, and you had to recognize whether this was spleen, thymus, lymph node, or tonsil. Certainly, you would understand with all of the bluish staining that it would be a lymphoid organ. And of course, when you see the lymphatic nodules scattered throughout, then that's a big clue that it's the spleen. And if you want further proof, then you could just enlarge it and find a central artery. So this was a classic lymph node presented here, and 3/4 of the class got it correct. But again, you see the nodules are all out here. You have a dark cortex with lymphatic nodules and germinal centers. You have a deeper cortex that's more or less solid running along here where the T lymphocytes are. And then you've got your medullary sinuses and medullary cords here. And your efferent vessels, lymphatic vessels, would probably come out about right here. And all along the capsule here is where your afferent lymphatics empty into the subcapsular sinus. Okay, this question, only 40% of the class got it correct. The correct answer was its media is dominated by elastic membranes. Well, you were asked to select a true statement about the organ with the black dot in its lumen. So here is the organ, and there's the black dot. Now what you had to do, you had to magnify this. So you go along the edge here, and now you see these wavy structures. These are all elastic membranes. And then you have smooth muscle nuclei and fibroblast nuclei in between those. So this is a large artery, most likely the aorta. And the true statement about it is media is dominated by elastic membranes. The muscular or medium-sized artery media is dominated by smooth muscle, and a large vein, the adventitia, is dominated by smooth muscle. And you may have, and some people chose this, is dominated by elastic fibers. There's the difference between elastic membranes and elastic fibers. These are not fibers, these are the membranes. These are sheets, membranous, like layers of inner tube with holes in it, perforated with fenestra. But a fiber is very thin and not at all thick and wavy like this. Okay, this question, the answer was a large vein. Some thought it was a large artery. A few people thought it was a muscular artery, and even fewer thought it were the other choices. Identify the organ represented by the virtual slide specimen. The arrows indicate the tissue layer that lines the lumen. This is a longitudinal section profile of the organ. So you go over here and look at it, and so here's the specimen, and you look at the lumen, and the first thing you should do is to zoom in on the lumen and see that there are very flat cells here, and that suggests the lining of the lumen with very flat cells, which would be simple squamous epithelium, or in this case, an endothelium. And the question actually was asking the organ, and most of the choices were a blood vessel type or the heart. Now the next thing you can look is here. You see these are smooth muscle cells in longitudinal section, and this is this is actually running along the course of the vessel, and out here you have these cross sections of smooth muscle cells, and this would be the intima here. In this region, this would be the media, and then out here would be the adventitia, and I have these smooth muscle cells that are oriented longitudinally in the outer layer. So this was a large vein. This was another vessel, and it was enclosed in a dotted line. You were asked to identify it, and was a distributing artery. And this is the vessel here. And you can see that this has a very wavy internal elastic membrane. It has a pure culture of, or a collection of smooth muscle cells in the media, and then you have the collagenous adventitia. So this fits the bill very nicely for a muscular or distributing or medium-sized artery. And in contrast, the next question, the correct answer was an arteriole. And this was the image. Clearly, an arteriole with only 2 or 3 layers of smooth muscle cell around it. You could have put your Z key down like this and enlarged it a bit if you like, and still there's a smooth muscle cell nucleus, 1, 2, 3. And then these are the nuclei of the endothelial cells, the simple squamous epithelium that lines the inside of this vessel. So that's an arteriole. Here we presented a specimen of the heart, and you were asked that the cells, that space marked X is lined with a single layer of cells in this virtual slide specimen. And these cells are a component of what named part of this organ? So the answer was endocardium. And here you're giving this low and high. This is the low power. You could have gone and looked at this around. You could see that this was adipose tissue. Here's myocardium. These are tubercular carne inside. But the X was put right in here. And then the lining cells are here. These are endothelial cells, alias simple squamous epithelial cells. And the inner layer of the heart here is endocardium. Say where the groups of structures with lumens encircled are in what region of this organ. And it was the hypodermis. And actually it was a specimen of skin. Here's the low power. And you could have reduced the magnification and went up here to verify that it was skin. You could see the stratified squamous keratinized epithelium. You could go back to the original view. You could look at this in low magnification. You could see that this is the epidermis. Here's the papillary layer of the dermis, and this dense irregular connective tissue is the dermis. And then down here with this location, this is located in the hypodermis, otherwise known as the panniculus adiposus. So these are sweat glands of the apricot type, APOCRINE, in the hypodermis. Okay, this question it showed you a blood vessel with a black dot in its lumen, and it says receives blood from which of the listed blood vessels. Well, you have to identify it first. And this again, this is an arteriole. You see the about 2 or 3 layers of smooth muscle cells around the lumen, around the endothelium. And arterioles receive blood from muscular arteries. I could have put distributing artery or medium artery, but the correct answer is blood vessel. The vessel was an arteriole. Arterioles supply capillaries. Capillaries are drained by venules and postcapillary venules. This was probably a challenging question, that's for sure. Match the correct tissue composition with a numbered layer in this virtual slide specimen. Well, it was a specimen of esophagus in the GI tract. It has 4 layers, and it had a mucosa, a submucosa, a muscularis externa, and an adventitia. So, without looking at the specimen, the correct answers on the first layer would be epithelium, connective tissue, and smooth muscle, because that makes up the mucosa. And even though you haven't learned in detail the GI tract, you should have been able to recognize the tissue. So let's take a look at the specimen. And when we magnify this, you see you've got connective tissue here, but you have smooth muscle cells here. You see the smooth muscle cells that some are in cross-section and some have nuclei, some do not have nuclei. And then this is the epithelium, which is stratified squamous, non-keratinized epithelium. This is not keratinized. There's cells all the way out here that are flattened and have nuclei. So epithelium, connective tissue, and smooth muscle form the mucosa, 3 tissues. Now we go back to the question. Here's layer 2. Sorry for the long pause there. I was trying to figure that out, and I didn't realize it was still recording. So this has adipose tissue and connective tissue. It's stained. Oh, I think something strange going on. Just a moment. I think I still had my cursor on the blackboard image below. So when I magnify this, and this was stained with a trichrome stain. So you see the collagen is blue, and the adipose tissue, these would be unilocular or white adipose tissue cells, adipocytes. And then layer 3 has longitudinal skeletal muscle and cross sections of skeletal muscle here. But it also has some smooth muscle over here. So, going back to the question, that was striated skeletal muscle, smooth muscle, and connective tissue. Looking at that once again, striated muscle, you could have looked at the muscle here, and you can see some striations here. You can see the cross section of the skeletal muscle here, and then you can see the smooth muscle here. Oh, it happened again, sorry. 3, and then layer 4 is simply connective tissue, and it was loose connective tissue. So let's see what the answer was here. Just plain connective tissue. It would have been sufficient for that. So that was pretty challenging, but it was a test to see if you could identify the basic tissues. Okay, this was a longitudinal section to the end of a finger. What is the correct name for the area circled in this virtual slide specimen? Well, the answer was hyponychium. Hypo means below, epi means above, okay, or upon. And so 47% of the class got it correct, and 52 or so incorrect. Well, see, here's the end of a finger. And we told you it was a longitudinal section at the end of the finger. So this is the end here. Here's the bone, the phalanx here, phalange. And that's part of the bone, the part of the cartilage, the articular cartilage on either side of a joint. And here's the nail, and you could have magnified this, see the nail here. Here's the skin. So this is the connection between the nail and the skin at the end of the finger. So that would be the hyponychium. The eponychium is here. Okay, here's a question. Throughout this specimen, there are numerous lightly staining sites. One is circled and two more are indicated by arrows. Name the cell type that occupies these sites. Okay, this was thymus. Now, you could see the low power over here and see right away you have a light area stain and dark, and it's all blue. So that pattern right there suggests the thymus. But you could have lowered the magnification like this and see immediately that it was the thymus, and you could double check that by the Hassel's corpuscles. So now you go back to what we're asking about, and you see these, and where are they? They're in the cortex. And these areas are where macrophages are that are taking out developing T cells that have an error in their DNA. And so they're just going to eat them up. So that nothing imperfect gets down into the medulla. And in the medulla, you just want CD4 and CD8 T lymphocytes. So that ends the review of Module 3, Part B.